The Viserion diplomatic nexus floated in the neutral zone between 6 major spiral arms, a monument to the galaxy's collective belief that talking was infinitely preferable to shooting. Which, to be fair, it usually was. The station itself resembled a crystalline flower that had been designed by a committee of overly optimistic architects who'd never seen actual combat. 73 species maintained permanent embassies there, each one representing civilizations that had clawed, bargained, or politely asked their way to interstellar significance. The prevailing wisdom among these species, a doctrine so universally accepted it might as well have been physical law, was that intelligence arose exclusively from prey animals, herbivores, creatures whose evolutionary ladder had been climbed while nervously glancing over their shoulders. The logic seemed sound enough. Predators never needed to develop complex social structures because dinner didn't require negotiation. Prey species, however, had to communicate, cooperate, and think 3 moves ahead just to see another sunrise. Every known spacefaring civilization had evolved from creatures that had, at some point in their history, been enthusiastically chased by something with more teeth and fewer ethical qualms. This belief had calcified into institutional certainty. The Galactic Collective's entire diplomatic framework rested on the assumption that all sentient beings shared a fundamental understanding. Survival came from avoiding conflict, from being clever enough to not fight in the first place. Wars were expensive, destructive, and most importantly, terrifying to species whose ancestral memories involved running away from things that wanted to eat them. The conference hall on Sublevel 7 could comfortably seat 200 delegates, though comfortably was a relative term when you were accommodating body plans ranging from the gelatinous Quarathi to the crystalline Xenorians, who technically didn't sit so much as resonate at frequencies that suggested sitting. The air recyclers worked overtime to maintain an atmospheric compromise that wouldn't kill anyone immediately, settling on a mixture that left everyone equally uncomfortable and convinced that their specific biological requirements were being ignored. Today's session concerned itself with the thrilling topic of frontier resource allocation. 17 different species had claims on mineral-rich systems in the outer verge, and someone had to decide who got to strip mine which asteroids. It was exactly the sort of mind-numbing bureaucratic slog that separated civilization from chaos, and everyone took it very seriously. Ambassador Theklan of the Krell Dominion cut an impressive figure, even by the generous standards of interstellar diplomacy. His species had evolved from herd animals on a world with limited resources, which had instilled in them a particular obsession with territory and efficiency. The Krell stood roughly 3 meters tall, with 4 legs supporting a torso that branched into 2 separate arm systems. Their faces were broad and flat, with eyes positioned on the sides of their heads, giving them an almost complete field of vision. Prey vision, safe vision. The kind of eyes that watched for danger from every direction. Theklan had been holding forth for the better part of an hour about the Dominion's claim to the Tertius Belt when the human delegation arrived. She walked in softly. That was the first thing everyone noticed, though few consciously registered it. No fanfare, no dramatic entrance. Just a small figure in simple diplomatic attire slipping through the side entrance, while Theklan continued his presentation. The human was perhaps 1.7 meters tall, which put her on the smaller end of the galactic scale. Her movements were economical, almost lazy, as she made her way to the Earth Confederation's designated seat. The second thing people noticed, for those who bothered to notice at all, was how unremarkable she appeared. Smooth skin, minimal body hair, no natural armor plating or defensive spines. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a simple arrangement that several species mistook for a threat display until they realized it was just a practical choice. Her clothing was equally unimpressive. A dark suit that would have looked at home in any corporate office across a dozen systems. The Quorithy observer, whose gelatinous body allowed for excellent multitasking, formed a subconsciousness specifically to assess the human. Conclusion: harmless, possibly decorative. The species had only achieved space travel 40 standard years ago, barely enough time to figure out which end of a fusion drive pointed where. Their assigned seat was in the back corner, the diplomatic equivalent of the kids' table at a family gathering. What no one particularly noticed, because evolutionary history hadn't prepared them to notice, were the eyes. The human's eyes pointed forward, both of them, in the same direction. Ambassador Theclon wrapped up his presentation with what he clearly believed was a rhetorical flourish. The Krell had never been known for their oratory skills, but they made up for it with sheer conviction. And therefore, he announced, his translator rendering his species' complex harmonic speech into flat galactic standard, the Dominion puts forward a proposal for the reallocation of colony rights in the Outer Verge territories currently held by less established civilizations. A polite way of saying, we want to take your stuff because you're too new to stop us. The human delegate raised her hand. Not urgently, not aggressively, just a simple gesture that somehow caught Theclon's attention despite occupying maybe 1% of his visual field. The chair recognizes the Earth Confederation, the session moderator announced, their translation device adding a faint electronic buzzing to every word. The moderator was a vesp, a species of six-legged creatures whose entire civilization had evolved from small burrowing animals that had survived 3 separate extinction events by being really, really good at hiding. Thank you, the human said, her voice carrying easily across the chamber despite its relatively quiet delivery. Just a clarification question for Ambassador Theclon, if I may. Theclon's posture radiated magnanimous patience. Of course. When you say less established civilizations, you're referring specifically to the human colonies on Kepler 442b, Ross 128b, and the Tau Ceti stations, correct? Among others, yes. No offense intended, but your species has only maintained extrasolar presence for 4 decades. These are frontier territories that require significant defensive infrastructure and resource management capabilities. The Dominion has centuries of experience in such matters. Right. Totally understand. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. And your proposal is that these colonies should be transferred to Krell administration because humanity lacks the capacity to properly defend or develop them. These are dangerous regions of space. Your species evolved on a garden world and has no natural adaptations for the rigors of frontier life. We would be doing you a favor, really, by assuming the burden of these territories. Your people could be relocated to safer regions, and the colonies would be properly managed by a species with appropriate experience. There was a murmur of agreement from several other delegations. The logic seemed sound. Humans were newcomers, their technology borrowed and adapted from a dozen other species' generosity. They had no natural defenses, no armor plating, no venom sacs, no ability to survive vacuum for even brief periods. Their homeworld, from all available data, was remarkably hospitable. Comfortable temperatures, abundant water, a single unremarkable moon, stable tectonic activity, the kind of place where evolution had been easy. The human delegate was quiet for a moment, and something about that silence made the translator pause in its constant background hum. When she spoke again, her tone remained pleasant, conversational even. I appreciate your concern for human safety, Ambassador Thekalon. Really, I do. But I think there might be some fundamental misunderstandings about Earth and human capabilities that we should probably clear up before we proceed with any territorial transfers. Would the Council indulge me for a few minutes? I promise this is relevant. The Vesp moderator looked uncertain, which for their species involved a complex dance of antennae movements. I suppose a brief educational exchange would be appropriate. Fantastic. The human pulled up a holographic display, and suddenly Earth hung in the air above the chamber, a blue and white marble, gorgeous and utterly unremarkable. So, this is home. Looks nice, right? Very photogenic. Class M planet, nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, carbon-based biosphere. You've all seen the basic reports, I'm sure. Nods and gestures of acknowledgement from around the chamber. Here's what the basic reports tend to gloss over. Earth's gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared, which I understand is roughly 1.4 times the galactic average for spacefaring species homeworlds. Not a huge difference, but it means humans are naturally stronger than our size suggests. More importantly, our atmosphere is 21% oxygen. Akorathi's subconsciousness did some quick calculations and formed an exclamation of surprise, which translated as a sudden shift in pigmentation. Yeah, the human continued, noticing the reaction. For those not doing the math, that's considered borderline toxic by most civilized standards. High oxygen content leads to high metabolism, which leads to increased cellular regeneration, which means humans heal fast. Like, disturbingly fast. A wound that would take most species weeks to recover from. We're usually functional again in days, sometimes hours, depending on the damage. She advanced the display, showing a rotation of Earth's biosphere data. Now, Earth's axial tilt is 23.5 degrees, which gives us pronounced seasonal variations. Temperature swings of 50 degrees Celsius or more, depending on location and time of year. Humans evolved to survive in deserts where daytime temperatures exceed 50 degrees and in Arctic regions where it drops below -40. We're not adapted to one environment. We're adapted to survive in almost all of them. Ambassador Thekalon shifted uneasily. This is all very interesting, but I fail to see how climate adaptability relates to getting there, I promise. So, Earth's biodiversity. We've got about 8 million distinct species, give or take. Most of them are still trying to kill each other. You know what the predator-to-prey ratio is on a stable garden world? No one answered. Roughly 1 times 1,000. One predator for every 1,000 prey animals. Keeps things balanced. Earth's ratio is closer to 1/100. 10 times as many predators per capita. Our planet is lousy with things that want to eat other things. And here's the fun part. Humans aren't actually at the top of the food chain. We're not the strongest, fastest, or most naturally armed species on our own world. The chamber had gone very quiet. We've got land predators that can run 100 kilometers per hour. Aquatic predators that can detect electrical impulses from muscle movements. Flying predators with vision so acute they can spot a rabbit from 3 kilometers up. And you know what humanity did? We killed most of them. Not all, we're not monsters, but enough that they learned to stay away. We didn't do it with natural weapons, because as you've correctly noted, we don't have any. We did it by being better predators than the predators. She pulled up another display, this one showing a sequence of images that made several delegates recoil. Persistence hunting. Humans can run longer than almost any other species on Earth. Not faster, longer. We used to chase prey for hours, sometimes days, until the animal literally collapsed from exhaustion. Our ancestors would track a deer or antelope until it physically couldn't run anymore, then walk up and kill it. We're endurance predators. We don't sprint, we don't pounce. We just keep coming. The Krell Ambassador's side eyes were both locked on the human now. A defensive instinct he didn't even realize he'd triggered. Our sweat glands allow for exceptional heat dissipation, meaning we can maintain pursuit in conditions that would kill most predators through heat stroke. Our bipedal locomotion is energy efficient over distance. And our pattern recognition. She smiled, and several species would later report that the expression didn't reach her eyes in quite the right way. Humans are really, really good at tracking. We can follow disturbed vegetation, irregular footprints, changes in animal behavior. We can predict where prey will go before it gets there. It's pattern recognition bordering on precognition. A holographic image appeared showing human skeletal and muscular systems. Now, about those natural defenses we supposedly lack. Humans can deliver a bite force of around 1/300 newtons, which is enough to sever fingers or crush bone. Our jaws contain 32 teeth, including specialized incisors and canines designed for tearing meat. We're omnivores, but the hardware is definitely predator adjacent. Our hands can grip with enough force to support our entire body weight with just one arm. We have opposable thumbs on a ball and socket shoulder joint, which means we can throw objects with lethal accuracy. Humans are the only species on Earth that can reliably hit a moving target with a thrown projectile. We used to kill prey by throwing rocks hard enough to crack skulls. The display shifted to show internal anatomy. Human pain tolerance is abnormal by galactic standards. We produce endorphins that can suppress pain signals during high-stress situations, allowing us to keep functioning through injuries that would incapacitate most species. There are documented cases of humans continuing to fight with broken bones, punctured organs, and blood loss that should have induced immediate shock. We also have this lovely adaptation called the fight-or-flight response, though humans tend to lean heavily toward the first option. When threatened, our adrenal glands flood our system with hormones that increase strength, reaction time, and pain tolerance, while temporarily shutting down non-essential systems like rational thought and self-preservation instinct. We become, briefly, optimized for violence. Ambassador Thecklon found his voice. This is alarming, but surely you're exaggerating the relevance of primitive evolutionary traits. Modern civilization has moved beyond such barbarism. Oh, absolutely, the human agreed cheerfully. Totally civilized now. That's why humans engage in recreational combat, sports, extreme environmental challenges, and consume neurotoxins for entertainment. We call it drinking alcohol. It's literally poison that we ingest because it makes social gatherings more tolerable. Our definition of fun includes activities like jumping out of aircraft, scaling vertical cliff faces without safety equipment, and surfing in waters populated by large predatory fish. She pulled up another data screen. Earth history is well documented, so I won't bore you with a comprehensive list. But here are some highlights. Over the past 10,000 years, humans have fought approximately 14,500 major wars. We've developed weapons ranging from sharpened sticks to nuclear devices capable of rendering entire planets uninhabitable. We've created toxins, biological agents, and delivery systems of such efficiency that we had to make international agreements banning their use because we scared ourselves. The only species in known history to achieve nuclear weapons before achieving reliable space travel, she noted. We split the atom and immediately thought, how can we make this explode bigger? Then we built several thousand of them, just to be safe. The chamber was absolutely silent now. Even the translator had stopped its ambient hum. Here's my favorite part. The human continued, her tone still conversational, almost friendly. Humans don't just fight threats. We fight for abstract concepts, honor, freedom, revenge. We'll fight over resources, sure, but we'll also fight over ideas, over religion, over whose imaginary friend has better rules. We once had a war that lasted 100 years because 2 royal families couldn't decide who got to sit in a fancy chair. And spite. Oh, don't get me started on spite. Humans will absolutely endure personal harm just to prove a point. We'll cut off our own supply lines, sacrifice strategic advantages, and make objectively irrational decisions if we think it'll make the other side suffer more. There's a human saying, "I'd let you punch me in the face if it meant you'd break your hand doing it." She advanced to another display, this one showing cultural data. Human entertainment reveals a lot about our psychology. We have entire genres of fiction dedicated to horror, stories designed specifically to trigger fear responses. We watch them for fun. We create elaborate scenarios of apocalypse, invasion, and survival against impossible odds, then consume them as recreation. Our children play games about hunting each other. Our lullabies reference catastrophic accidents and death. We also, and here her voice took on a particularly casual quality that made several delegates instinctively lean away, have a disturbing tendency to form emotional attachments to things that could kill us. Humans keep predators as pets. We domesticated wolves, apex predators in their own right, and bred them into hundreds of varieties. Some humans own large cats, reptiles with venomous bites, or spiders that can deliver medically significant toxins. We think they're cute. Ambassador Theklan's translator was having difficulty keeping up with his stress vocalizations. The human noticed, but continued anyway. Now, you mentioned that Earth is a garden world, and questioned our ability to handle frontier conditions. Let me address that. Earth has sustained 5 major extinction events that we know of. The most recent one, the KT extinction, eliminated roughly 75% of all species on the planet. Humans weren't around for that one, but we did survive the Toba supervolcanic eruption 74,000 years ago, which reduced our population to maybe 10,000 individuals and triggered a volcanic winter that lasted a decade. We bounced back. We're really good at not dying. Our planet has active plate tectonics, which means earthquakes and volcanic eruptions are routine occurrences. We have severe weather patterns, hurricanes with wind speeds exceeding 250 kilometers per hour, tornadoes that can level entire settlements, monsoons that dump meters of water in days. We have regions where the temperature regularly exceeds human tolerance levels, and regions where exposure means death in minutes. And humans live in all of these places. We build cities on fault lines, in flood zones, in areas with regular volcanic activity, and we just accept that sometimes nature tries to kill us. She paused, took a breath, and her expression shifted into something that might have been sympathy if it weren't for those forward-facing eyes. Here's what I'm trying to convey, Ambassador Theklan. When you look at humans, you see prey characteristics. We're small, we lack natural armor, we seem soft. And compared to many species, we are. But Earth didn't produce prey species that made it to the stars. Earth produced omnivorous persistence predators with pattern recognition abilities bordering on precognition, pain tolerance that allows us to function through catastrophic damage, and a psychological profile that treats warfare as a viable solution to resource disputes. The human colonies you want to claim? They're populated by volunteers, people who chose to leave Earth, chose to live on frontier worlds with minimal infrastructure and significant danger. Do you know why humans volunteer for that? Because some of us get bored when things are too safe. We seek out challenge. We want to test ourselves against hostile environments. Ambassador Theclon attempted to regain his diplomatic composure. I think you're overstating the case. Surely modern humans have evolved beyond such primitive. 3 months ago, the human interrupted gently. A Krell science vessel experienced a containment failure in the Proxima system. The crew of 47 was stranded on their ship with failing life support, no communication, and approximately 18 hours before their atmospheric recyclers gave out completely. Do you remember this incident? Theclon's expression suggested he did, though he clearly wished he didn't. The nearest Krell response vessel was 4 days away. The nearest collective patrol was 2 days away. There was a human cargo freighter 8 hours out, crew of 6. The freighter diverted, matched velocity with the damaged science vessel under conditions that violated about 15 different safety protocols, and performed an emergency evacuation using nothing but cargo nets and some truly alarming improvisational engineering. The freighter's captain, and I checked the transcript of this, told your science crew, "We can fit maybe 20 of you in our life support capacity safely. The other 27 will have to hot bunk in the cargo bay with supplemental oxygen, and it's going to be uncomfortable as hell. But nobody's dying today." Then they proceeded to keep all 47 Krell alive for 3 days in a ship designed for 6 occupants, burning through their own supplies and risking decompression the entire time. Your government sent a formal thank you, the human continued. Very polite. The freighter crew framed it. They thought it was hilarious because they said they were just doing what any human would do. And they're right. Humans have a really inconvenient psychological quirk where we can't watch someone die if we think we can prevent it. Even when it's dangerous, even when it's illogical, even when it's someone we don't particularly like. She let that hang in the air for a moment before continuing. But here's the thing about that rescue, Ambassador. The same psychological wiring that makes humans run toward danger to save strangers is the same wiring that makes us dangerous when someone threatens our people. We pack bond aggressively. Those colonists on Kepler 442b and Ross 128b, they're ours. You're not proposing resource reallocation. You're proposing that we abandon our people. And humans don't do that. We really don't do that. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees, though the environmental controls hadn't changed. Now, the human said, her tone brightening to something almost cheerful. Let me tell you about the 3 previous species that tested human territorial claims. I'll keep it brief because the details get a bit dark. First was the Yithrak Collective, about 20 years ago. They decided that humans couldn't possibly defend the mining operations in the asteroid belt and sent a military expedition to claim them. The belt miners, most of whom were contractors with zero military training, responded by using their mining equipment as weapons. Turns out, a ship designed to crack asteroids apart can do really interesting things to armored hulls. The Yithrak lost 14 vessels before they withdrew. The miners lost 2. The Yithrak issued a formal apology and paid reparations. Second was the Chorus Harmony, a hive mind species that didn't believe individual humans could coordinate effectively without a central consciousness. They attempted to colonize Mars, while humans were already establishing bases there. The conflict lasted 6 weeks and involved exactly 0 human casualties, because it turns out that humans, despite being individuals, can coordinate disturbingly well when motivated. The Chorus withdrew, issued an apology, and now maintains a very respectful embassy on Earth. Third was the Drexler Communion, who attempted to enforce a blockade on human shipping routes about 8 years ago. They wanted tariffs, we wanted free passage. Negotiations failed. The blockade lasted 9 days before the Drexler discovered that human ships, when sufficiently motivated, will just ram blockade vessels at near relativistic speeds. The kinetic energy involved in a collision at those velocities is effectively a weapon of mass destruction. After losing their third enforcement platform, the Drexler reconsidered their position. They also apologized. Notice a pattern? The human's smile didn't waver. Humans really prefer diplomacy. We like talking. We like trade. We like peaceful coexistence. But when someone threatens us, we have this unfortunate habit of escalating until the other party decides that whatever they wanted isn't worth the cost of taking it from us. Ambassador Theklan's forelegs had locked into a defensive stance that his conscious mind probably didn't even register. Are you threatening this council? Absolutely not, the human said. And she sounded genuinely surprised by the question. I'm providing context for informed decision-making. You asked about transferring human colonies to Krell administration. I'm explaining why that's not feasible. The colonists wouldn't agree to it, and forcing them would require an occupation. An occupation would be resisted. Resistance would escalate. The escalation would be expensive, bloody, and ultimately unsuccessful because here's what nobody seems to understand about humans on frontier worlds. She leaned forward slightly, and even though she was one of the smallest beings in the chamber, somehow she seemed to take up more space. Those colonists aren't there because they couldn't survive on Earth. They're there because Earth was too boring. They're people who looked at a planet with 90% of Earth's gravity, an atmosphere you can't breathe without processing equipment, and temperature swings that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. And they said, yeah, that looks like a good place to raise my kids. They're not afraid of frontier conditions. They sought them out. They're the descendants of people who crossed oceans in wooden ships, who walked across continents dragging their possessions, who looked at hostile environments and decided to live there out of spite. You want to take colonies away from people like that? You'd have better luck arguing with a supernova. The chamber remained silent. The kind of silence that happens when everyone is simultaneously recalculating their assumptions. So here's what I propose, the human said. Her tone shifting back to something resembling normal diplomatic courtesy. The Earth Confederation withdraws any objection to the Krell Dominion's claims on the unoccupied systems in the Outer Verge. Plenty of resources there, nobody's using them. You can strip mine to your heart's content. In exchange, we'd appreciate if the proposal regarding human colonies was forgotten. We'll continue to develop our territories. You'll develop yours. And everyone can maintain the fiction that we're all civilized species who solve problems through dialogue rather than violence. We really would prefer not to demonstrate why Earth is classified as a Class-12 Deathworld. Not because we're worried about the outcome, but because it would damage our reputation. We're trying to be good neighbors. We'd like to be known as the friendly species that helps with rescue operations, not the scary ones that everyone avoids making angry. But we will protect our people. I want to be very clear about that. We will protect our people, and we're disturbingly good at it. Ambassador Theklan was silent for a long moment. His translator provided no output because he wasn't saying anything. Finally, he managed to speak. I believe the Krell Dominion may have made an error in our assessment of the situation. We would be willing to amend our proposal to exclude currently occupied human territories. That would be appreciated, the human said, warmth returning to her voice. I think we can find a mutually beneficial arrangement here. The Krell are excellent administrators, and I'm sure the unoccupied systems will prosper under your management. The VESP moderator's antennae performed a complicated dance that the translator rendered as profound relief. Then, shall we proceed to the next item on the agenda? The rest of the session proceeded smoothly, almost cordially. The human delegate was surprisingly accommodating on other matters, agreeing to resource-sharing agreements and trade concessions that seemed generous given her earlier demonstration. Other delegations found themselves reassessing their assumptions about humanity. Not just about their capabilities, but about their intentions. When the session finally concluded, Ambassador Theklan approached the human delegate. His body language was still defensive, but he'd managed to override his instincts enough to attempt courtesy. "I apologize if the Dominion's proposal caused offense," he said, his translator struggling with the nuances of contrition. "We meant no insult to humanity." "None taken," the human replied easily. "Honest misunderstanding. We're still pretty new to the galactic stage, and I know our species doesn't fit the usual patterns. We're working on making sure everyone has accurate information. That's why I brought all those data files. Wouldn't want anyone making decisions based on incomplete intel." "Yes, quite." Theklan hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering him since her presentation. "Is it true, all of it? The violence, the predatory adaptations, everything?" The human considered the question seriously. "More or less. I glossed over some stuff and emphasized the dramatic bits. But yeah, it's mostly accurate. Earth is kind of a nightmare by galactic standards. We didn't really understand that until we met other species and realized that most of you evolved on planets that didn't actively try to kill you on a regular basis. And yet, you claim to be civilized." "We are civilized," she said. And there was no irony in her tone now. "That's the important part. We're not savage. We're not monsters. We're people who happen to come from a really hostile environment. We learned to cooperate, to build societies, to create art and music and literature. We did all of that while also learning to survive on a planet that's basically a cosmic horror show. That's why we're so protective of our people, Ambassador. Because we know exactly how hard survival can be, and we're not going to let anyone make it harder." Theklan nodded slowly. "I think I understand. And for what it's worth, I'm glad we talked rather than tested your species' defensive capabilities." "Me too," the human said with genuine feeling. "War is terrible, expensive, and leaves everyone worse off. Much better to hash things out over conference tables." She walked out softly, the same unassuming figure that had entered hours earlier. But now, every delegate in the chamber tracked her movement with a new awareness. Those forward-facing eyes weren't a genetic accident. That small frame wasn't a sign of weakness. That soft demeanor wasn't prey behavior. It was camouflage. In the days that followed, the Viserion diplomatic nexus experienced an unusual surge in requests for detailed information about Earth and human biology. Trade agreements were carefully reviewed to ensure they didn't accidentally disadvantage human colonies. Territorial disputes involving human-claimed space were quietly resolved in humanity's favor. Not because anyone was afraid of humans, exactly, but because everyone had suddenly become very interested in maintaining good relations with the species from the Class-12 Deathworld. The Krell Dominion's official statement on the matter was brief. Upon further review, the Dominion recognizes the Earth Confederation's rightful claim to all currently occupied territories and looks forward to continued cooperation on matters of mutual interest. Human diplomats across the galaxy reported a marked shift in how they were treated. More respectful, more cautious, more aware. It was gratifying, in a way, though some found it slightly uncomfortable. They were the same people they'd always been, after all. They just happened to come from a planet that was trying to kill them most of the time, which had naturally selected for certain survival traits that looked alarming when presented in list form. Back on Earth, when word of the diplomatic incident reached the general population, the response was typically human. Someone made a comedy show about it. Several universities added new courses on Deathworld diplomacy. A popular musician wrote a song titled "Soft Footsteps, Sharp Teeth" that topped the charts for 6 weeks. And on the frontier colonies, the ones that had almost been transferred to Krell administration, the colonists raised a glass to the diplomat who'd reminded the galaxy that humans were very polite, very reasonable, and very much not interested in being pushed around. One colonist on Kepler 442b, a third-generation frontier settler who'd been born in a habitat module and had never seen Earth, summed up the general sentiment in a message to the Confederation Embassy. "Tell that diplomat thanks for having our backs. Also tell her that if anyone does try to take our colony, they're going to discover that frontier life selects for stubbornness. We've got mining equipment, improvised weapons, and nothing but time. It'd be a terrible idea for everyone involved, but we'd make it really expensive." The embassy forwarded the message. The diplomat read it and smiled, because of course the colonists would respond that way. They were human. Give them a hostile environment and impossible odds, and they'd find a way to not just survive, but thrive. Give them a threat to their homes, and they'd remind everyone why Earth's predators had learned to avoid humans. She walked softly, that diplomat, because humans had learned that sometimes the best defense was letting others underestimate you. But she carried with her the weight of 3 billion years of evolutionary pressure, of a species that had survived ice ages and supervolcanoes, that had domesticated fire and split the atom, that had looked at the stars and decided they were worth reaching. The galaxy was beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, they should be a little more careful about their assumptions, because the thing about apex predators is that they don't always look like apex predators. Sometimes they look small, soft, and harmless, right up until they decide they're done being underestimated.